The jungle was alive with sounds. Sharp cries of unseen creatures echoed between the thick trees. Moist air clung to the skin like a wet blanket, and the ground was soft with rotting leaves. Every step seemed to wake something dangerous, even. The most experienced alien hunters walked here with fear in their eyes. They called it the Bloodfang Jungle. It was home to the deadliest predator in this part of the galaxy, the Bloodfang Striker, a beast with muscles like steel, claws that could slice through armor, and fangs dripping with venom strong enough to kill a giant in seconds. No one hunted it for fun. No one hunted it without heavy weapons. Most who tried never came back. A group of alien soldiers stood at the jungle's edge, their weapons ready. They were not here to hunt. They were here to watch something insane. In front of them stood a human, tall, broad-shouldered, with short brown hair and a calm look on his face. He had no armor, no rifle, no blade, just his hands, the alien. Captain stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Human, this is not a game," he said. "You go in there without weapons, you do not come back." The human, his name was Jack, only smiled. "Maybe," he replied, "or maybe I'll bring you a gift." The soldiers laughed. Some shook their heads, whispering that humans were reckless. One young alien scoffed loudly. "He's just trying to impress us before he dies." Jack stepped into the shadow of the trees. The vines closed around him, the light fading. The soldiers kept their eyes on the jungle for the next hour. Bird-like screams came from deep inside. Something huge crashed through the undergrowth. Then silence. 2 hours passed. Some soldiers began to relax, certain the human was already dead. But then a sound came from the shadows. Heavy footsteps, slow and steady. Every weapon turned toward the noise. Branches parted, and Jack appeared. In one hand, he held the neck of the Bloodfang Striker. The creature's massive body dragged behind him, its claws twitching, its yellow eyes full of rage. Jack was bleeding from a scratch on his arm, but he was walking like it was nothing. The alien soldiers froze in disbelief. The young alien who had mocked him before gasped, "No way. Did you just catch the toughest creature to hunt with your bare hands?" Jack dropped the beast at their feet with a heavy thud. The creature roared, but Jack pressed his palm against its snout, and it went still. Not dead, alive. The captain took a step forward, his voice low. "How?" Jack shrugged. "You just have to know where to hold it," he said. His tone was casual, but his eyes were scanning the tree line. Like he knew something else was still out there. The aliens crowded closer, staring at the Bloodfang in shock. One reached out, only for Jack to warn sharply, "Don't touch its fangs." The soldier pulled back quickly. Word began to spread through the camp behind them. Other aliens came running, wanting to see the human who had done the impossible. Whispers turned to shouts. Some called him the greatest hunter they'd ever seen. Others muttered about tricks. One elder alien frowned deeply. "This is not natural. No man should walk away from a fight with this beast." Jack ignored them. He knelt beside the Bloodfang. Whispering something under his breath, the beast's ears twitched. Its breathing slowed. Jack's hands were steady, his movements careful. It was like watching a man calm a wild storm. The captain finally said, "This is no gift, human. This is a challenge." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What kind of challenge?" The alien's eyes narrowed. "Tomorrow, you do it again in front of all of us. No tricks, no hiding." Jack smirked. "If that's what you want," he said. But in his mind, he wasn't thinking about showing off. He was thinking about something far more dangerous. He hadn't come here to prove himself. He had come for what the Bloodfang carried inside its venom, and he wasn't leaving without enough to save his people. As the sun dipped behind the trees, the jungle seemed to grow darker. Somewhere deep inside, another roar echoed. This, one louder, sharper, more dangerous. Jack looked toward the sound. He could feel the soldiers around him stiffen. He smiled to himself. The hunt wasn't over yet. Asterisk, the Bloodfang lay tied with thick cables in the center of the alien outpost. It's breathing deep and angry, a low growl rumbling in its throat every time someone got too close. The air around it felt heavy, as if the jungle itself had followed. Jack back, alien guards stood in a wide circle, weapons raised, but their eyes kept flicking toward the human sitting calmly on a crate nearby. Word of what had happened in the jungle had already spread far beyond the camp. Traders arriving from other settlements stopped in their tracks when they saw the massive predator lying alive in the dirt. Hunters from other worlds came just to stare, and whispers grew into open voices, some calling Jack a hero, others calling him a fool. But all of them wanted to know the same thing. How had he done it? The alien captain stood near the edge of the crowd, speaking in low tones to a tall, gray-skinned officer with silver eyes. The officer was from the ruling council. His presence meant this was now more than just a story. This was politics. Jack could hear snatches of their conversation. They didn't believe it was skill. They suspected secret human tech, hidden weapons, something illegal. And that suspicion made them dangerous. The silver-eyed officer stepped forward, his gaze sharp and cold. "Human," he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "You will come to the council hall. They wish to speak with you." Jack didn't move at first. His eyes stayed on the Bloodfang. "If they want to talk, they can talk here," he said quietly. The officer's eyes narrowed. "You refuse the council's invitation." Jack stood slowly, stretching his shoulders. "I refuse to waste time." Gasps ran through the crowd. No one spoke to the council like that. But Jack's tone wasn't arrogant. It was controlled, calculated, the kind of voice that made people wonder if he knew something they didn't. The officer tilted his head slightly, studying him, then turned away without another word. The alien hunters moved in closer now, their armor clicking as they circled him. One, a broad-shouldered female with green markings on her face, crouched low and stared at the human's hands. "They say you used nothing but these," she said. "Show me how." Jack shook his head. "Once is enough." "Afraid?" she asked, but her smirk faltered when Jack's eyes met hers, calm but unblinking. "Afraid of wasting my strength," he replied. The Bloodfang suddenly jerked against its restraints. The cables groaning, several guards leaped back, weapons raised, but Jack didn't move. Instead, he stepped forward, placed one hand on the beast's head, and spoke in a low, strange rhythm. The growling stopped. The beast's yellow eyes blinked once, twice, and then its body relaxed. The crowd was silent. Somewhere in the back, a voice shouted, "It's a trick. He's drugged it." Another voice answered, "Then why is it still breathing?" The arguments grew louder, and Jack could feel the tension tightening like a rope. He knew if the council decided he was dangerous, they'd kill him before sunrise. A small movement caught his eye, a young alien girl, barely more than a child, slipping through the crowd, her eyes wide as she stared at him. She was thin, her clothes ragged, and she looked like she hadn't eaten in days. She stepped closer and whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "They want your beast. They want it before the moon rises." Jack leaned slightly toward her. "Who?" She glanced toward the gray-skinned officer and then vanished back into the crowd. Jack sat back down on the crate, but inside, his mind was running fast. They weren't just curious. They were planning to take the Bloodfang by force. And if they did, the reason he came here would be gone. He needed the venom, not for trade, not for pride, but for a purpose no alien could know. The day stretched on, more outsiders arriving, more questions thrown his way. He answered none of them. Every hour the Bloodfang grew more restless. The jungle sounds never seemed far. And Jack could feel something in the air, the same pressure he felt before a storm, When night finally began to fall, torches lit the camp in flickering gold. The crowd had thinned. But the guards around the Bloodfang had doubled. Jack stayed where he was, pretending to rest, waiting, because he knew they would come for it before the moon was high. He was right. Shadows moved beyond the torchlight. Shapes slipping between. Tense, the gray-skinned officer appeared, flanked by silent soldiers in dark armor. They approached the Bloodfang, their steps slow, deliberate. One of them raised a dart rifle. Jack stood before they could take another step. His voice breaking the stillness. Touch it, and it wakes. The officer's silver eyes glinted in the torchlight. "It's ours now," he said. "No," Jack replied. "It's mine until I'm finished." The two men stared at each other, and for a moment, the camp held its breath. The Bloodfang growled, deep and low, the sound curling through the night air like a warning. The officer finally smiled, but it was the kind of smile that promised trouble. "Then tomorrow, human, you will prove yourself again," he said. "You will enter the jungle before dawn, with no one but the eyes of the crowd to watch you, and you will return with another. If you can." Jack didn't answer right away. He was already thinking of the deeper parts of the jungle, the places even the Bloodfang feared to go. The officer thought this was about sport, about pride. But Jack knew the truth. The next hunt would be far more dangerous than anyone expected. And if he failed, it wouldn't be just his life that ended. The night in the alien camp felt longer than usual. The jungle beyond the walls was restless, strange cries echoing through the darkness. Jack sat on a low bench near the Bloodfang, sharpening a short metal spike he had found in the supply yard. He didn't plan to use it as a weapon for the hunt, but as a tool for something far more important. His eyes stayed on the beast, its chest rising and falling in slow, deep breaths. Every so often, it opened one golden eye to watch him. Jack knew that look. It was the same look a wounded soldier gave another, a kind of understanding. He wasn't here to kill it, not if he could help it. He thought back to the months before he came to this alien world. On a human colony far from here, a sickness had spread like fire through his people. It started with weakness in the muscles, then breathing trouble, then death. Human medicine had failed, but a small research team had found something, a chemical inside. The venom of the Bloodfang striker that could neutralize the disease. The problem was, the only known source was deep inside this alien-controlled jungle. And the aliens saw the Bloodfang as a sacred challenge, not a cure. Jack had volunteered for the mission, knowing it was suicide. One man against a predator that could tear him apart in seconds. But he also knew something the aliens didn't. Humans had fought things just as bad before. He had spent years in survival units during the Zareth War, learning how to bring down enemies without weapons. The next morning came with the sharp sound of alien horns. The crowd gathered again, this time larger than before. Hunters, traders. Even nobles from the higher districts had come. The gray-skinned officer was there too, standing at the front with his silver eyes fixed on Jack. "Today, human," he said loudly. "You will prove the first was not luck." Jack glanced at the Bloodfang still bound in the center of the camp. "When I return, I want this one untouched," he said. The officer raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Jack didn't answer. He simply stepped toward the jungle. The aliens followed at a distance, staying just inside the tree line. Jack could feel their eyes on his back. They expected a show, something to talk about over drinks later. But he wasn't here to entertain. He moved quickly, slipping deeper into the shadows. Past the thick vines and giant roots, he knew the Bloodfang's habits. It hunted near water at dawn, waiting for prey to come and drink. Hours passed. The sound of rushing water grew louder. Jack moved silently through the undergrowth until he reached a wide pool. The air here was colder, the light dim even though the sun was up, and then he saw it. Not one, but two Bloodfangs crouched at the water's edge. Their heads low, muscles tense, Jack knew he couldn't take both, so he watched them carefully. One was older, larger, its scars deep. The other, younger, faster, more dangerous. He chose the younger, stepping slowly from behind a thick tree. The creature's head snapped up, eyes locking on him. It hissed, a sound like steam escaping. And then it lunged. The aliens watching from afar leaned forward, whispering, expecting Jack to dodge or run. Instead, he stepped toward the beast, twisting at the last second to grab the side of its neck. They crashed into the mud, Jack's arm straining against its weight, claws raking the ground inches from his face. He shifted his grip, forcing its head sideways just enough to stop the bite. It was a fight of strength and will, the bloodfang thrashing, Jack holding on with every ounce of power he had. Finally, with a sharp movement, he pinned it against a fallen log, his knee on its shoulder, one hand pressing the jaw shut, the other gripping behind the skull. The beast shuddered, then went still from the trees. The aliens were silent. No one had expected him to survive the first attack, let alone end it so quickly. Jack tied its legs with a vine he had prepared earlier. Then, without waiting, he took a small glass vial from his pocket, carefully pressing it against one of the bloodfang's venom glands. The liquid inside began to fill. Glowing faintly in the dim light, he only had seconds before the beast woke again. He sealed the vial, tucked it into a pouch at his waist, and then began dragging the creature back toward camp. When he emerged from the jungle, the crowd erupted. Some cheering, others staring in shock. The gray-skinned officer stepped forward, looking from the new bloodfang to Jack. "You are not just a hunter," he said slowly. "You are something else." Jack didn't answer. He could feel the vial pressing against his side, its weight heavier than gold, heavier than anything he had ever carried. Because it meant lives, the crowd swarmed closer. And the officer gave a thin smile. "Tomorrow," he said, "you go again." Jack looked at him without expression. But in his mind, he knew the truth. The officer wasn't going to wait until tomorrow. Someone would come for that venom tonight, and Jack had no intention of letting them take it. That night, the alien camp felt different. Not just tense, but watchful. Every torch seemed to burn lower than usual. Every shadow seemed thicker. Jack sat cross-legged near his tent, pretending to rest. But his eyes were half open, his ears tuned to every sound. The vial of bloodfang venom lay hidden in a cloth pouch under a loose stone behind him. The crowd from earlier had mostly gone. But the gray-skinned officer and his personal guards stayed close to the bloodfang pens. Too close, Jack thought. The officer didn't care about the hunt, not really. He cared about the venom and what it could buy on the black markets beyond this planet. The wind shifted, bringing with it the smell of the jungle and something sharper, the faint scent of burned metal. Jack recognized it instantly. It was the smell of plasma weapons being primed. He stayed still, waiting from the shadows near the outer wall. 3 figures slipped into the camp, their armor dark, faces hidden. They moved with the silence of trained killers, heading straight for the bloodfang he had brought back earlier. Jack's fingers tightened on the metal spike he had been sharpening since last night. The guards near the beast didn't react, which told Jack everything they were in on it. One of the intruders knelt beside the creature. Holding a long, thin tube, they were going to extract the venom here and now, not wait for the hunt tomorrow. Jack rose silently, moving behind the nearest tent, each step slow, deliberate, his shadow blending with the canvas walls. The gray-skinned officer stood just a few meters away, watching the thieves work, a faint smile on his face. Jack's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "Funny way to prove you trust me." The officer turned sharply, his smile vanishing human. "You don't," but Jack was already moving, the metal spike in his hand flashing in the torchlight as he slammed it into the ground beside the bloodfang's head. The beast roared, jerking against its restraints. The sudden movement startled the thieves, one dropping the venom tube, another stepping back too quickly. Jack's boot caught his ankle, sending him sprawling. In the chaos, the Bloodfang snapped one of the weaker ropes. Its head free now, teeth snapping inches from the intruder's back. Jack barked, his voice low but carrying power. The thieves froze for a moment, unsure if he meant them or the beast. It didn't matter. The Bloodfang lunged, sending them scattering. One dropped his weapon, another disappeared into the dark. The officer stepped forward, his face tight with anger. "You have made an enemy tonight, human." Jack stepped between him and the creature. "I already had one," he said. The camp was fully awake now. Guards rushing in, shouting, but by the time they arrived, the intruders were gone. The only trace of them, the dropped plasma pistol lying in the dirt. The officer barked orders for the guards to search the jungle, but Jack could tell it was for show. They wouldn't find anything. He walked back to his tent, sitting again as if nothing had happened. But his mind was racing. He couldn't keep the venom hidden here. Not with so many eyes watching, tomorrow's hunt would be even more dangerous. Not because of the Bloodfang, but because of the people who wanted him dead before he could finish his mission. As the night dragged on, the jungle's noises returned, but softer now, as if something large was moving quietly through it. Jack's instincts told him the intruders might try again. So he moved the venom pouch, tying it under his shirt where no one could grab it without getting too close. Hours later, just before dawn, the alien captain approached his tent, his face serious. "The council has changed the challenge," he said. Jack didn't move. Changed how? The captain glanced over his shoulder, lowering his voice. "They don't want just another Bloodfang. They want you to bring back the Alpha." Jack's eyes narrowed. The Alpha wasn't just bigger, it was smarter. Faster and far more dangerous. A single swipe of its claws could cut a man in two. No hunter had ever faced it and lived. The captain hesitated, then added, "You don't have to do this, human. Walk away and no one will think less of you." Jack stood, slinging a coil of vine rope over his shoulder. "If I walk away, people I care about will die," he said simply. The captain didn't ask what he meant. Maybe he didn't want to know. He just stepped back as Jack moved toward the jungle again. The first pale light of dawn touching the treetops. Somewhere deep inside those shadows, the Alpha waited. And Jack knew this hunt would decide everything. The jungle at dawn was not the same as the jungle at night. The mist clung low to the ground, curling between the roots like ghostly fingers. Every sound was sharper, clearer, the snap of a twig, the rush of wings, the distant growl of something. Huge Jack moved quietly, each step measured. The vine rope at his side swaying gently. The Alpha was out there. And it would not be fooled by the tricks that worked on younger Bloodfangs. The air was colder here, the trees thicker, and the smell of damp earth was heavy. Jack's eyes scanned the ground. Looking for the deep claw marks that only the Alpha left, he found them soon enough for deep grooves, fresh, and pressed into the mud so hard that water had already begun to fill them. The size alone told him this was no ordinary predator. From the outer edge of the jungle, far behind, alien watchers kept their distance, perched in the high branches of the trees, their recording drones following silently. They wanted proof of either his victory or his death. Jack didn't care about the watchers. He cared about the fact that he was now deep in the Alpha's hunting ground, and the rules here were simple. The Alpha hunted you. The first sign came as a ripple in the mist. The birds overhead went silent. All at once, Jack froze, listening. His pulse steady but ready. Then he heard it, a slow, deliberate crunch of leaves not far ahead. He crouched low, keeping his body small. Through the trees, the Alpha emerged, and it was bigger than he'd imagined. Its head level with Jack's chest, even while crouched. Its scales dark and patterned like broken shadows. Each step was silent despite its size, golden eyes scanning. The trees with a predator's focus, its fangs glistened. A faint drop of venom falling to the ground and sizzling in the dirt. Jack knew he couldn't face it head-on, not yet, so he moved sideways, slow and silent. But the Alpha's head snapped. Toward him almost instantly, it had caught his scent in one heartbeat. It lunged. Jack dove aside, rolling through the wet leaves as claws tore a deep scar into the ground where he'd been standing. The Alpha's roar shook the air, birds scattered in a screaming cloud. He ran, weaving through trees, knowing it was right behind him. He didn't run for escape. He ran for the trap he'd seen earlier. A fallen tree lying across a shallow pit, its roots tangled like a net. He leaped over it, then turned sharply. Holding his ground, the Alpha charged, its bulk smashing in two. The tree, the ground, gave way beneath it. One massive front leg caught in the tangle. Jack was already moving, the vine rope whipping through the air. He wrapped it around the trapped leg, anchoring it to a thick tree trunk. The Alpha thrashed, its other claws swiping dangerously close. One blow caught Jack across the shoulder. The pain hot and deep, but he didn't let go. With one last pull, he tightened the rope and stepped back, breathing hard. The Alpha roared again, venom dripping. Freely, Jack pulled out another small glass vial from his belt, stepping close enough to press it carefully against the venom gland. The liquid inside glowed the same pale green as before, but before he could seal the vial, a new sound cut through the jungle voices. Not alien hunters, but the same dark-armored thieves from before. They had followed him here, 3 of them. Stepping out of the mist with weapons raised, handed over, human, one barked. "No one has to die today." Jack's eyes narrowed. "You're in the Alpha's territory," he said quietly. "Everyone here could die today." They laughed. But it was short-lived. The Alpha twisted violently, snapping one of the ropes and lunging, its massive head swinging toward the intruders. Chaos exploded, the thieves scattering, plasma shots flashing through the mist. The Alpha ripping one weapon clean from a soldier's hands. Jack used the moment to seal the vial and tuck it away. But the fight wasn't over. One of the thieves turned his weapon on him. Jack ducked behind a tree as the shot scorched the bark, his shoulder bleeding, his breathing heavy. The Alpha's roars mixing with shouts and gunfire. This wasn't a hunt anymore. It was a war zone. In the blur of movement, the Alpha broke free completely, charging into the trees with terrifying speed. Dragging one screaming thief in its jaws, the others fled, vanishing into the jungle. The silence that followed was sudden and thick. Jack stood slowly, wincing, the vial pressing against his ribs like a reminder of why he was still breathing. The Alpha was gone, but it wasn't finished with him. No predator left a hunt incomplete. He could feel its presence still out there, watching, learning, waiting. He started the long walk back to camp, his arm throbbing, the mist curling around him like the jungle's breath. The watchers in the trees, following his every step. They had seen the truth. The human wasn't just surviving the hunts. He was walking through them like they were his natural home. But as the camp's walls came into view, Jack knew the real danger hadn't passed. The thieves would return, the officer wouldn't stop, and the Alpha. The Alpha had just begun to take an interest in him. Asterisk, by the time Jack reached the alien camp, the mist was lifting. But the jungle still seemed to cling to him. The wound on his shoulder burned, and every step made his muscles ache. The crowd gathered quickly when they saw him, some staring in awe, others in open suspicion. The gray-skinned officer stepped forward, eyes searching Jack's face. No Alpha. The officer asked, his voice calm but edged with something sharp. Jack gave a small shake of his head. "Not this time," he said. The officer smirked. So the human can bleed after all, but Jack noticed something. The officer's gaze kept drifting toward Jack's chest, where the hidden vial pressed against his ribs. The alien captain approached, looking at the wound. "You need a healer," he said. Jack shook his head. "I'll manage." He didn't want alien medics anywhere near him, especially with the venom so close. That night, the camp settled into uneasy quiet, but Jack didn't rest. His instincts were prickling. The jungle's sounds beyond the walls were wrong. Not the normal distant cries, but a low, steady rumble, like heavy breathing. He moved to the edge of the camp, his eyes scanning the tree line. At first, he saw nothing. Then, a flicker of golden eyes in the darkness, low to the ground, unblinking, the Alpha. It had followed him, not to hunt, not yet, but to watch. He stepped back slowly, but the Alpha moved forward, its massive head emerging from the shadows. The guards didn't notice until it was already inside the outer ring of torches. Then the shouts began. Weapons were raised, orders were shouted. But Jack knew shooting it here would be a disaster. The beast's speed would cut through half the camp. Before it fell, he stepped forward, hands raised. "Hold your fire," he called. The Alpha's eyes locked on him, ignoring the shouting aliens around them. It took a slow step closer, its claws sinking into the dirt. Jack's mind raced. This wasn't a random attack. The Alpha was testing him, remembering their earlier fight. The officer barked, "Kill it." But Jack spun toward him. "You fire, and it tears this camp apart." The officer hesitated, not out of mercy, but because he knew Jack might be right. Jack moved another step closer to the Alpha, his voice low, steady. "You followed me here because you want to finish what we started?" The beast's head tilted slightly, as if it understood. Then it lunged, not at him, but at the guards on the left, scattering them. The camp exploded into chaos, torches falling, shadows leaping across the walls. The Alpha moving like a shadow with teeth. Jack ran toward it, dodging a swinging claw and grabbing one of the ropes from the blood-fang pens. He leaped, hooking the rope over a support beam, swinging onto the Alpha's back. The beast bucked wildly, its roar deafening. Jack wrapped the rope around its neck, not to choke it, but to control its head. He gritted his teeth against the strain, holding on as the Alpha twisted and snapped. The officer shouted something, but it was drowned out by the screams of guards. Scrambling out of the way, Jack pulled hard to the right, forcing the Alpha's head down into the dirt. For a moment, its movement slowed, just long enough for him to press a small tracker device under its jaw. Then he let go, rolling hard onto the ground. The Alpha shook itself violently, ripping the rope apart in seconds. It looked at Jack one last time, a slow, almost deliberate stare. Before turning and vanishing back into the jungle, the camp was a mess. Overturned supplies, broken fences, and scorch marks where weapons had fired too late. The officer stormed toward Jack Fury. In his eyes, "You let it escape," he shouted. Jack stood, brushing dirt from his arms. "No," he said simply. "I made sure we'll find it again." The officer didn't like the answer, but the captain's eyes flicked to Jack with something like respect. The Alpha hadn't come for the camp. It had come for him, and now Jack knew exactly where it would be. That night, while the camp repaired its defenses, Jack sat alone, his hand resting on the pouch with the venom, his mind already on the next move. The tracker's signal would lead him straight to the Alpha's lair. And if the venom from a young bloodfang could save his people, the Alpha's venom might save even more. But he also knew this. Going there meant walking into a place no hunter had ever left alive. And this time, there would be no crowd, no camp, and no second chances. Asterisk, asterisk. The jungle swallowed him before sunrise. The camp was still asleep, except for the captain who had watched silently as Jack slipped past the gates. No words were exchanged, just a look that said, "You know, this is madness." Jack knew it too, but he kept moving, the tracker in his hand glowing faintly, pulsing in the direction of the Alpha's lair. The ground grew steeper as he followed the signal, the air heavier, and even the sounds of the jungle faded. This was a place where nothing else dared to live. The trees twisted like bones, the earth scarred with deep claw marks, each one the size of his forearm. After an hour, he sought a wide, jagged cave mouth at the base of a cliff. Dark as an open wound, the signal was strongest here. He crouched low, checking the rope coiled at his side, the metal spike in his belt, and the 2 empty glass vials in his pouch. Inside, the air was cold, damp, and carried the smell of blood. The walls were streaked with old marks, and the ground was littered with bones. Some small, some too large to think about. Jack moved quietly, each step slow, his breath measured. Then he heard it, the deep, steady breathing he remembered from that night at the camp. Golden eyes opened in the darkness ahead. 2, then 4, then 6. His chest tightened. There wasn't just the Alpha. There were others, smaller, younger, the Alpha's offspring. This changed everything. He realized why the Alpha had followed him, why it had spared him. He had wandered into the territory of a mother. Not just a beast, and now she stood between him and her young. The Alpha stepped forward, its head low, teeth bared but not attacking yet. Jack slowly lowered himself to one knee, his hands open. He didn't want to fight, not unless he had no choice. He reached into his pouch, pulling out one of the empty vials. Holding it up so the dim light caught the glass, he spoke softly, his voice calm. "I need your venom." Not to kill, but to save. The words meant nothing to the creature, but his tone, his stillness, seemed to make it pause. Then, in a movement so fast it was a blur, the Alpha lunged, stopping inches from his face. Its breath hot and sharp. Jack didn't flinch. Instead, he reached slowly toward one of the long fangs. The Alpha growled low, but didn't strike. He touched the fang just enough to press the vial against the venom gland, the liquid filling with that faint, deadly glow. A sharp crack echoed from outside the cave. Jack froze. Voices followed. Alien voices. The thieves again. They had tracked him. They didn't care about the Alpha. They just wanted the venom. Blaster fire lit the cave mouth. The Alpha roared, the smaller blood fangs hissing and retreating deeper inside. Jack spun toward the noise. The first thief charging in, weapon raised. Jack ducked low, tackling him into the dirt, the shot going wide. The Alpha charged behind him, smashing another thief against the cave wall in a spray of dust and rock. In the chaos, Jack grabbed the second vial, quickly filling it from the other fang, his hands steady despite the noise. When he was done, he sealed both vials and shoved them into the pouch under his shirt. The last thief turned to run, but the Alpha was faster, cutting him down before he reached daylight. The cave fell silent, except for the heavy breathing of the great beast. Jack stood slowly, blood on his arm from a fresh cut, his eyes meeting the Alpha's. He gave a small nod, a silent promise, and stepped backward toward the cave mouth. The Alpha didn't follow, just watched him go, golden eyes unblinking until the jungle swallowed him again. By the time Jack returned to the camp, the aliens were waiting. The officer stepped forward, his smile cold. "So, did you bring proof of your victory?" Jack dropped a claw the size of a sword at his feet. The officer's eyes widened, but before he could speak, Jack was already walking past him toward the landing pad. The captain caught up, his voice low. "You didn't kill it, did you?" Jack shook his head. "No. But I took what I came for." He tapped the pouch under his shirt. The captain didn't ask again, As Jack boarded the small transport, the officer called after him, "Why risk your life for a beast you could have mounted on your wall?" Jack stopped at the ramp, glancing back. Humans don't hunt for trophies. We hunt for survival. Then he stepped inside, the ramp closing behind him, far beyond the camp, deep in the jungle. The Alpha stood at the mouth of its cave, watching the sky as the human ship rose into the clouds. It had spared him once, but if he ever came back, the jungle would decide again who was the hunter and who was the prey. Asterisk, asterisk.